Esteemed friends, we are born into a world of shifting sands. Emotions rise and fall like tides. Fortune favors and forsakes without warning. In such a place, what can stand unmoved? What keeps a person upright when the winds of fate howl from every side? It is reason. Not the cold calculation of ambition, nor the cleverness that seeks only advantage, but the steady-rooted force that asks, what is right? What is true? What depends on me, and what does not? The weight of reason is not a burden, it is an anchor. It grounds us when desire pulls us forward and fear yanks us back. It reminds us that we are not ruled by the whims of the crowd, nor by the impulses of our own flesh. We are sovereign over our judgments. That is our gift, our dignity, our armor. To live by reason is not to be unfeeling. It is to feel rightly, joy that comes from virtue, sorrow rightly placed, anger when just tamed by discipline, and above all, to walk through life with a mind clear enough to discern what matters and a heart brave enough to act upon it. Ask yourself in every moment, is what I am doing within my power? Is it guided by virtue, by courage, justice, wisdom, and self-restraint? If not, why do it? If yes, then let no fear nor noise disturb your course. Others may insult you. Reason weighs their words and finds them light. Fortune may withdraw her favor. Reason does not beg. Death may knock. Reason answers with composure, for it has already lived in readiness. This is not a call to coldness, but to clarity. To live as one who sees truly, to feel deeply, but with direction. To be strong, not in defiance of life, but in harmony with it. Let others chase shadows. Let them tremble before what they cannot control. But you bear the weight of reason, and you will find it is not a weight at all, but wings. Reason, in its truest form, is not a heavy yoke that stifles the human spirit, but the very thing that gives it structure. It is not a burden imposed on the soul, but the foundation that allows it to stand upright. In a world that spins wildly with fortune's whims and emotional storms, reason acts as an anchor. Without it, a person is like a ship without a rudder, constantly pushed and pulled by tides of impulse, fear, pleasure, and sorrow. With it, one gains direction, balance, and an unshakable center. The storms may still come, but they no longer determine the course. To live without reason is to be a slave to every fleeting feeling. One moment brings delight, the next despair. Anger surges, then shame follows. Desires multiply without end, and aversions shrink our lives into narrow paths of avoidance. In this state, we are not truly alive by our own volition. We are being lived by our reactions. Reason is the faculty that interrupts this cycle. It steps between the stimulus and the response. It asks, what exactly is happening here? What judgment am I placing upon this event? Is that judgment correct, or is it inherited, unexamined, or false? When a person embraces reason as their guide, they begin to recognize how many of their sufferings were self-inflicted, born not from the world itself, but from their interpretation of it. A harsh word from a stranger becomes not an attack, but a test. A missed opportunity is not a failure, but a redirection. Even physical pain, though real, can be met with discipline if it is not exaggerated by panic or resistance. Reason shows us the boundary between what can be changed and what must be endured. That boundary is often invisible to the untrained mind, which thrashes against reality instead of understanding it. Reason doesn't eliminate emotion, it disciplines. A person governed by reason still feels, but the feelings are no longer tyrants. They become companions placed in their rightful roles. Joy is experienced without attachment. Sadness is acknowledged without surrender. Anger arises only in the service of justice, and even then it is tempered. The difference lies in the order of command. The unreasonable person is ruled by their passions. The reasonable person leads them. This anchoring effect extends not just to internal states, but to how one interacts with others. When insulted, reason evaluates the insult before responding. Is it contempt? If so, it is a gift, a mirror revealing something that can be improved. If false, then it is nothing but wind. Why take offense at air? When someone else acts unjustly, reason asks what might cause such a fault: ignorance, fear, pressure, and responds with correction, not condemnation. This steadiness does not come from weakness or indifference. It comes from understanding. And understanding, when cultivated deeply, replaces reaction with intention. Reason also frees us from the tyranny of the crowd. It allows us to think clearly even when surrounded by confusion. When the masses chase after novelty, luxury, or reputation, reason remains still. It is not swayed by fashion or fear of judgment. It knows that applause and scorn are both fleeting and that character is built in silence, in moments when no one is watching. The person who holds reason as their compass may walk alone, but they do not walk blindly. In times of crisis, the value of reason becomes even more visible. Panic spreads quickly among those without internal stability. But for one grounded in reason, crisis is not chaos. It is simply a new environment in which to exercise judgment. The principles remain unchanged. What is in my control? What is required of me now? How can I act with virtue in this moment? These are the questions that matter. They replace fear with focus and confusion with clarity. There is a natural division in all things that confront us, those that lie within our control and those that do not. This single distinction is the cornerstone of tranquility. To understand it, to truly accept it, not just as an idea but as a way of life, is to step out of the shadow of confusion and into the light of peace. Much of human suffering comes from forgetting this line or refusing to honor it. People exhaust themselves trying to bend the external world to their will, to ensure outcomes, secure approval, avoid loss and guarantee success. But the world is not built to obey our preferences. Fortune is indifferent to our desires. The weather changes, bodies age, reputations fluctuate, and death comes for all. To resist these facts is to declare war on reality, a war no one has ever won. Control resides in a far smaller space than most would like to admit. We do not control the actions of others, the opinions of the crowd, or the twists of fate. We do not control the past. We do not command the future. But within this narrow space that is ours, our thoughts, our judgments, our choices, we are sovereign. We decide whether we meet events with clarity or confusion, with courage or cowardice, with virtue or vice. This inner domain, though small in scope, is vast in power. It is where character is forged and freedom found. When people confuse what they control with what they do not, suffering multiplies. They become angry at things they cannot change, afraid of outcomes they cannot prevent, and proud of achievements that were never fully theirs. A sailor does not command the wind, but he can set his sail. A farmer cannot make the rain fall, but he can till the soil and plant with care. To act wisely is not to control all things, but to act excellently within the sphere that is ours. Acceptance is not passivity. It is clarity. It is the recognition that effort must be directed where it matters. To struggle against the inevitable is not noble. It is wasted energy. There is a quiet strength in knowing when to act and when to let go. If a loved one grows ill, we do not waste our spirit demanding the world be different. We offer care, presence, and support. If a job is lost, we grieve it, but then we turn to what is next. We meet reality with clear eyes, not bitter hearts. This acceptance does not make us cold. It makes us compassionate. Knowing how little is under our control, we judge others less harshly. We understand that ignorance, fear, and misfortune play large roles in behavior. We choose forgiveness not because others always deserve it, but because carrying resentment poisons us more than them. The peace of acceptance makes room for kindness because it is not preoccupied with control. To live with this principle is to gain a kind of invincibility. No praise makes you proud because you know praise is not in your control. No insult wounds you deeply because your worth does not rest in the hands of others. No loss breaks you entirely because you never claimed ownership over what the world merely loaned. What you hold most dearly, your mind, your will, your integrity, remains untouched by external shifts. The more tightly a person clings to what cannot be held, health, status, wealth, the more fragile their life becomes. They become like a person trying to carry water in a clenched fist. The wise open their hand and hold lightly what must one day pass. In this loosening, they do not lose everything. They gain themselves. They stop being tossed about by every wave and instead become the calm that floats within. In a world full of distractions, shifting values, and competing desires, there must be a compass to navigate life with clarity and purpose. That compass is virtue. Without it, choices become confused, actions inconsistent, and peace elusive. Virtue provides the standard by which all decisions can be measured. It is not something imposed from the outside, but something intrinsic to the nature of a rational being. To live according to virtue is to live in accordance with what it means to be fully human, not merely to exist, but to flourish. There are 4 pillars that form the foundation of virtue: wisdom, courage, justice, and self-restraint. These are not abstract ideals for the elite or the saintly, they are practical tools for daily living. Wisdom is the ability to discern what is true and what is false, what is important and what is trivial. It sees clearly and makes judgments without haste or distortion. Wisdom does not panic because it understands the nature of things. It is the quiet mind that steps back before it steps forward. Courage is the strength to act rightly in the face of fear, danger or pain. It is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. It says, yes, this is difficult, but I will do what must be done. Courage allows a person to speak truth when silence is safer, to stand alone when the crowd turns away, to continue when everything in the world tempts surrender. It is the force that transforms principles into action. Justice is the constant will to give each their due. It requires seeing beyond the self and understanding that we are part of something larger, a shared humanity, a common fate. Justice does not bend to popularity, convenience, or profit. It listens before it speaks. It acts not for gain, but for what is right. It treats the low and the high with equal dignity. It is not satisfied by law alone, but by fairness and integrity. Self-restraint or temperance is the quiet power that governs desires and impulses. It says no when pleasure becomes excess. It knows when enough is enough, when silence is better than speech, when delay is wiser than indulgence. It does not seek to destroy desire, but to master it. A person ruled by appetites cannot be free. They are dragged by whatever is loudest in the moment. Self-restraint gives space to the soul to breathe, to choose with intention rather than instinct. When a person lives by these virtues, they become stable, not because life is easy, but because they are anchored in something unchanging. Their worth does not rise and fall with success or failure, because they do not measure themselves by outcomes, but by effort and integrity. A virtuous person does not need the world to applaud them, nor does criticism shake them deeply. Their peace comes from within, earned by consistency in thought and deed. Every decision becomes simpler when virtue is the measure. Should I lie to gain advantage? Should I betray a friend for favor? Should I chase wealth at the cost of conscience? These are no longer difficult questions when one is committed to virtue. The answer is clear, even if it is costly. A virtuous life is not always an easy life, but it is the only life that offers true self-respect. Virtue cannot be borrowed, inherited, or faked. It must be cultivated day by day in small choices and great ones. It grows stronger through challenge, not ease. Like a muscle, it must be exercised or it weakens. Each time a person chooses what is right over what is easy, virtue takes deeper root. It is not the act itself that defines a person, but the principle behind it. Even failure, when met with honesty and a desire to improve, becomes a part of virtue. To feel is part of being human. Emotion is not the enemy of reason, but its counterpart. The problem arises not from feeling, but from being ruled by feeling, when emotion becomes the master and reason the servant. The wise do not seek to extinguish emotion, they seek to govern it. They recognize that the passions left unexamined are powerful forces that can distort perception, cloud judgment, and push the soul into imbalance. But under the guidance of reason, emotion becomes not a storm, but a current directed with purpose. There is a difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is automatic, driven by fear, desire, or habit. Response is deliberate, filtered through understanding and guided by principle. A person who reacts without thought becomes a puppet to circumstance. One who responds with reason becomes the author of their own behavior. Emotion is not suppressed, but translated. Anger becomes a call to justice, not violence. Sorrow becomes a moment for reflection, not despair. Joy becomes gratitude, not attachment. Each feeling has its place and reason assigns it. Discipline of emotion does not demand coldness. It requires depth. It means we do not let temporary sensations dictate permanent values. A harsh word does not provoke hatred. A disappointment does not unravel the soul. Instead of being tossed about by every shift in mood or fortune, the wise remain steady, feeling what they feel, but never becoming those feelings. There is a calm strength in being able to observe an emotion without being consumed by it. It is the difference between having anger and being angry, between noticing fear and living in it. This inner clarity allows for a more genuine connection with others. When feelings are not inflated by ego or distorted by insecurity, relationships deepen. Compassion becomes possible, not as a performance, but as a recognition of shared humanity. One does not need to prove superiority or hide vulnerability. Reasoned emotion is honest and measured. It neither pretends nor overwhelms. It allows us to speak with kindness, listen with patience, and disagree without hatred. Passion ungoverned often disguises itself as strength. Loud anger is mistaken for power. Dramatic sorrow is seen as authenticity. But the strongest person is not the one who explodes or collapses, but the one who remains rooted when feelings swell. This is not denial. It is mastery. To feel anger rising and yet choose words that build rather than break, that is strength. To grieve without losing purpose, that is strength. To experience joy and yet remain grounded, that is strength. The training of emotion begins with awareness. Before a person can govern their feelings, they must recognize them. They must name what arises within: jealousy, fear, pride, resentment, and then ask, is this justified? Is it useful? What belief underlies it? Often emotions are the result of false assumptions. That life must go a certain way, that others must behave as we wish, that success is owed to us. Reason challenges these assumptions and, in doing so, reshapes the emotions they produce. There is also a rhythm to emotional discipline. It is not achieved all at once. One moment may be calm, the next reactive, but each return to reason strengthens the habit. Over time, the soul becomes more settled. The highs and lows lose their grip. Joy is no longer frantic. Sadness no longer sinks. There is room to breathe between stimulus and response. That space is where wisdom lives. A person who feels with reason is not less alive, but more. They are not numbed, but awakened. Emotion is richer when it is not distorted by delusion or uncontrolled craving. Love that is rational is not colder. It is more enduring, more just, more whole. It seeks not possession but partnership. It elevates rather than consumes. Similarly, righteous anger, when refined by reason, becomes a tool for justice, not a weapon of destruction. Emotion becomes an ally, not a threat. Adversity is the proving ground of character. It is in moments of difficulty, insult, loss, and uncertainty that the true strength of a person is revealed. When things go well, many can appear calm and composed. But when misfortune arrives, the difference between appearance and substance becomes clear. The one who has built their life upon external things, approval, possessions, status, finds themselves shaken when those things are taken away. But the one who has trained the inner self through reason stands firm. They do not crumble under pressure, because their peace was never rooted in things that could be lost. Composure in adversity begins with perception. Events in themselves have no meaning. It is our interpretation of them that gives them weight. An insult is only harmful if we accept it as true, or as something that should upset us. A setback is only crushing if we had wrongly assumed success was guaranteed. Pain is real, but suffering is magnified by judgment. The disciplined mind examines each challenge and asks, what has truly happened, and what story am I telling about it? This separation between event and interpretation is where composure begins. A person grounded in reason knows that many of life's difficulties are inevitable. People will speak harshly. Bodies will weaken. Accidents will happen. Loved ones will be lost. None of this is under our command. What remains within our power is how we respond. The wise do not deny pain or pretend it does not exist. They simply do not allow it to master them. They feel what must be felt, and then they act as virtue requires. They maintain dignity even when humiliated. They maintain kindness even when mistreated. They maintain courage even when afraid. This composure is not indifference. It is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of control. It is the ability to feel fear without being ruled by it, to feel sadness without drowning in it, to feel anger without letting it become destructive. It is the stillness that comes from knowing that external things, however unpleasant, cannot touch the core of who we are unless we let them. The wise guard that core with care. They remind themselves daily that reputation, wealth, and even health are not guaranteed, and that their loss should not be a surprise. Expectation is the root of much distress. Those who assume comfort will be permanent are devastated when it is not. Those who live prepared remain steady. When insulted, the composed person does not retaliate blindly. They ask, is the insult true? If so, it is a chance to improve. If false, it is irrelevant. Why be troubled by what is not real? If the words come from ignorance or malice, they reflect more on the speaker than on the one spoken of. To be angered by such things is to give them more value than they deserve. Composure does not mean silence in all cases, but it means response without surrendering control. Adversity also refines virtue. It tests whether our principles are real or merely ideas. It is easy to speak of justice until one is wronged. Easy to speak of courage until one is threatened. Easy to praise temperance until one is denied what they want. Adversity calls forth either collapse or clarity. The wise welcome it not because it is pleasant, but because it is honest. It shows them where they are strong and where they must grow. In crisis, when others panic or fall into despair, the composed person becomes a source of steadiness. They offer calm not only to themselves but to those around them. Their example becomes a quiet strength for others to hold on to. They do not speak dramatically or act impulsively. They act with care, with thought, and with resolve. In the midst of turmoil, they remain a center that does not shake. The self that most people present to the world is often a performance. It is shaped by expectation, molded by fear, and constantly adjusted according to the reactions of others. This outer self seeks approval, avoids disapproval, chases recognition, and fears rejection. But beneath that performance lies something deeper, more enduring, and far more valuable, the inner self. The task of the wise is to turn attention inward, to discover who they are when no one is watching, and to nurture that self above all else. The pursuit of inner integrity is not a withdrawal from life, but a return to its most essential truth. To know oneself is not to collect opinions or labels. It is to observe thoughts without flattery, to question motives without defensiveness, to recognize flaws without self-contempt. This kind of self-knowledge is a discipline. It requires silence, reflection, and honesty. The person who turns inward seeks not comfort, but clarity. They ask not, what do others think of me? But what kind of person am I becoming? The applause of the world fades quickly, but the judgment of the inner voice is constant. It speaks in quiet moments, asking whether one's actions align with their principles. To care for the inner self is to build character. It is to cultivate habits of thought and behavior that do not depend on recognition or reward. Integrity means doing what is right even when it is costly or unnoticed. It means saying no to things that harm the soul, even if they bring short-term gain. The person anchored in inner virtue chooses simplicity over pretense, truth over popularity, and purpose over pleasure. They do not need to broadcast their values. They live them. Their consistency becomes their message. There is great freedom in living from the inside out. A person no longer needs to chase trends, impress strangers, or fear exclusion. Their sense of worth is not tied to how others react, but to how well they live by what they know to be right. They can walk through life with quiet confidence, not because they are perfect, but because they are sincere. Even their mistakes become lessons rather than sources of shame. They examine them without panic and change without delay. The turning inward is also a way of resisting the noise of the world. So many voices shout about what should matter: wealth, fame, beauty, dominance. But these are fleeting and often empty. The person focused on their inner life asks a different set of questions. What am I responsible for today? Where can I show more courage, more honesty, more patience? How do I stay true to myself in the face of difficulty or temptation? These are not glamorous questions, but they are the ones that build a strong and lasting self. This inner focus does not lead to isolation. On the contrary, it strengthens connection. When a person knows themselves, they can meet others with openness and humility. They do not project their insecurities or demand others complete them. They listen with attention, speak with care, and act with purpose. Their presence becomes steady because it is not a role. They are not acting, they are simply being. Relationships become less about possession or validation and more about shared truth. The commitment to the inner life is ongoing. It is not completed in a moment or a single decision. It must be renewed each day in thought and in action. It is maintained in small choices, telling the truth when it is inconvenient, practicing restraint when it would be easier to indulge, offering kindness when it is not returned. Over time, the person who lives in this way builds something no one can give or take. A soul at peace, a mind in harmony, a life lived from the core. When a person lives this way, rooted in reason, governed by virtue, steady in adversity, and faithful to the quiet labor of the inner life, they carry a weight not of burden, but of purpose. It is the weight of reason, calmly borne, which steadies the soul and clarifies the path. In a world tossed by impulse and noise, they walk with stillness. In a time that honors spectacle, they choose substance. They need no applause to validate their worth, no comfort to justify their peace, for they have built their life not on shifting ground, but on something unshakable, and that at last is freedom.